India is on the brink of an unprecedented power crisis, a crisis which has been in the making for months. As more than half of the country's 135 coal-fired power plants stare at an acute shortage of supply, we break down India's coal crisis for you. 70% of India's electricity generation comes from coal. India is largely dependent on its 135 coal-fired power generation plants for electricity, and concessional tax benefits continue to be the largest subsidy to the coal sector. Newer acts, amendments continue to make a big push towards coal, making it the centerpiece of India's energy system. The crisis has been in the making for months as India's economy picked up after the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic and the demand of power rose. Power consumption in the last 2 months alone has jumped almost by 17% compared to the same period in 2019. Amid the pandemic, as power demand has recovered faster than expected, the country's thermal power plants are struggling with critically low supplies of coal.
How do coal power plants get coal? Coal is mined in one place, then it is loaded into trucks or trains and dispatched to power companies, and then that's how this entire operation works. The other part of that is also that we can also import coal, and currently the challenge is like how it happens is whenever there is a crisis like this, whenever the local domestic coal production gets impacted or transportation gets impacted, the country will also say, okay, let's import more coal than usual, right? What happened now is the international coal prices across the world has gone very high. Therefore, it's not viable for these companies to buy coal at much higher prices and keep producing and distributing electricity at the cost that they are currently allowed to do, right? So there is a import crunch plus apparently a so-called coal crunch as well, and because power plants do not have stock. So that's the underlying crisis, right? I go into the numbers. I think currently definitely we could have avoided this, right? Why I'm saying that is, I was looking at the coal stock numbers at the power plants, how much coal India has been producing in the last several months, and what has been the demand, right, of electricity during the same period. So from May onwards, coal power companies have not been stocking enough coal, right? So that is, if you ask me in one line, that is the nutshell of the crisis. For whatever reason, they didn't anticipate that demand would be all-time high, right? Because in July and August, we had energy consumption that is, I think, all-time high for us in decades, right? So they didn't anticipate this high demand, right? Rather, they didn't buy enough coal and stock it up in their, in their stockpiles, right? And they continue to use their whatever existing reserves. And one fine day, the reserves were becoming 10 days worth, then 5 days worth. Now it is 4 days worth or whatever, right? So that is what led to the crisis.
While the centre claims that there is no shortage of coal, power plants are shutting down and data suggests otherwise. The warnings came after the Central Electricity Authority released a report claiming that of the 135 power plants, they are left with coal stocks for less than 4 days of supply. The CEA, in its reports, has also mentioned that 115 plants are facing an acute shortage of coal amid the surge in demands. Previous reports show that Coal India warned the advisor to the Federal Power Ministry in February of an impending fuel shortage as utilities tapped inventories and curbed purchases despite rising coal-fired power output. State-run Coal India told the Central Electricity Authority, the CEA, that it was evident that a crisis is arising unless immediate action was taken to increase supply to power plants, according to a February letter which was reviewed by the Reuters. Union Power Minister R.K. Singh too had warned about the coal shortage only last week when stocks were already down to less than 4 days in many power plants. However, Prahlad Joshi, the Union Minister of Coal and Mines, and R.K. Singh, the Union Minister for Power, said on October 10th that India won't face any blackouts in the coming days due to the coal shortage. However, the NTPC admitted that the excess stocks it had maintained as reserves were in short supply. It stated that it's working towards replenishing these reserves, that such a shortage of reserves was a regular phenomena during monsoons. Typically, coal-based power plants keep coal stocks for power generation on their premises for over 15 to 30 days, depending on their distance from the mines. So while Power Ministry has said that there is a crisis, Coal India has blamed the Power Ministry, stating that there should have been 22 days of coal stock which was not created. While the centre says that inadequate coal stocking by power plants could lead to bigger power cuts, NTPC remains the dominant supplier of coal as it owns the monopoly of Coal India Limited, which supplies over 50% of the coal which is consumed. NTPC, the largest thermal power generator, is also a PSU. So the logical question to ask here is, why did Coal India not increase production in the last 4 years? It has shown negative growth since 2017, even as the Modi government spoke about the Atmanirbharta in coal. Another question is, despite having a surplus, then why instead of investing it to increase production, was it used as a dividend to the centre to meet the growing fiscal deficit? No explanations have been offered so far. The Rajasthan government has already announced power cuts in almost all the districts, while in Maharashtra, 13 power plant units supplying power to Maharashtra State Electricity Distribution Company Limited are shut because of the coal shortage. In Delhi, on the other hand, Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal said that the power situation is very critical in the entire country, even as his cabinet colleague Satyendra Jain claimed that the Delhi government has to depend on costly gas-based power and spot purchase at high market rate, as the NTPC had halved the electricity supply to the city. In Tamil Nadu, the latest and the official data as of October 10th had an average stock of coal for about 4 days. State-run Bangalore Electricity Supply Company Limited, which is BESCOM, had also on Monday announced that a number of areas in Bengaluru are likely to face power outages on Tuesday. Amid the crisis, a larger push for opening up of extensive mining activity is deemed likely. Activists and researchers says that this atmosphere is being created to fuel a kind of desperation in which Coal Bearings Act can be passed in the next parliament session. As per the government's own data, the production of coal in India from April to September has increased from 282 million tons to 315 million tons. Thus, if there is a shortage, it could be for other reasons. Senior fellow at the Center for Policy Research, Kanchi Kauli, says that it's important to contextualize the narrative around the coal shortages in two ways. First, in the light of the lukewarm response to the coal auctions and the government's push for amendments to Coal Bearings Act, and second, to the decline of the social legitimacy for coal due to the unfulfilled promises of jobs, rehabilitation, and the long legacy of environmental contamination.
So this what is created to support the agenda the Modi government is having. Modi government was planning to bring the amendment in Coal Bearing Acquisition Act in the last session itself. But because of the fallout of farm laws, they were not having enough courage to bring that in that session. Now what they are doing, they want to create an atmosphere that we need more and more coal. And it is a TINA factor. There is no alternate. We have to do this. So Modi government wants to carry out this draconian amendment by which, without fixing compensation, without passing an award, land would stay vested in a private company. That is the amendment. That is how the Coal Bearing Acquisition Act works. Without fixing the compensation, without passing the award, land stayed vested with the company, and that leads to a fait accompli situation. In that sense, you are not in any farmer or tribal is not in a position to demand a proper compensation. They had to accept whatever is being offered. That under compulsion, under the national interest, the so-called national interest, we have to do this. You need to sacrifice. You need to sacrifice for the betterment of the country. This is the whole narrative has been built up. To go by the climate talks and the climate diplomacy going on in the whole world, coal, we have to accept that coal or any fossil fuel is not having a very bright future. It has to be phased out. It will be phased out sooner or later.
India recently held its second round of coal block auctions, offering 67 blocks, against which it had received an interest for only about 19 coal mines. During the first round, wherein 38 blocks were up for grabs, only 20 managed to be auctioned. It is the first time since the 1970s that coal blocks have been up for auction in India. In its latest move, the central government has pushed through the Coal Bearing Areas Acquisition and Development Amendment Bill 2021. The bill, while exempting the private parties from conducting social impact assessments and paying fair compensation or seeking the consent of locals, also sets a precedent for land acquisition. This is raising serious concerns.
द वायर के और वीडियोस देखने के लिए सब्सक्राइब करें और बेल आइकन पर क्लिक करें। स्वतंत्र पत्रकारिता की आर्थिक मदद करने के लिए डिस्क्रिप्शन में दिए गए लिंक पर जाएं और अपनी राशि चुनें।